Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Star Wars The Acolyte Episode 7, Choice. I have so many questions after this episode that was supposed to answer everything. So for this breakdown, let's go scene by scene to break down the details you missed, some Star Wars Easter eggs, and some secrets in the music. So at least we can all try to get on the same page as to what the questions are headed into the finale. And I am wearing our awesome Peace is a Lie shirt featuring Chimere's Cortosis helmet. And you can get one of these at nerdriot.shop, which supports New Rockstars directly. Please and thank you. So episode 3, Destiny, and episode 7, Choice, are part of a dual narrative, like episode 4, Day, and episode 5, Night. All the other episodes this season have compound word titles, while episode 3 presented one account from the girls feeling like their lives were shaped by destiny. We learned this episode that destiny was actually being shaped by the choices of a group of Jedi. The episode opens on Brendok 16 years prior, and right away we see some ruins atop these highlands that look like a force hinge. That's a word given to the ruins we saw on Tython in The Mandalorian, and we saw another set of these ruins on a different part of Brendok in the opening shot of episode 3. This episode establishes that Brendok contains what's called a vergence in the Force. A vergence, aka a nexus in the Force, refers to a naturally occurring location with a heightened concentration of Force energy. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant had been constructed on and within a mountain called the Sacred Spire, which was a nexus point of great energy. Just a reminder that while Coruscant is covered in a cityscape, the city is actually built atop of mountains, and The Mandalorian Season 3 showed us the peak known as Umati. The Jedi Temple on Ilum, the planet where the Jedi would harvest their kyber crystals, was said to have been built on a vergence as well. We actually heard Qui-Gon use the term in a slightly different context in The Phantom Menace.
I've encountered a vergence in the Force.
But the concept of a geographical vergence in the Force originally came from The Empire Strikes Back, the cave on Dagobah that Yoda told Luke to go into. So while vergences can be wellsprings of good, they can also be wellsprings of darkness. And actually brought up the Dagobah cave last week in reference to Chimere telling Osha what it was like under the Cortosis helmet.
It blocks out all your senses?
So it's just you and the Force, and what you bring with you.
Which of course echoed what Yoda told Luke that he would encounter in the cave.
What's in there?
Only what you take with you.
So while the Jedi are searching for traces of energy to confirm Brendok has a vergence, they obviously aren't the first ones here based on these ruins on top of the hill. So I actually think that this could have been colonized by the Sith before the hyperspace disaster and before someone brought the Coven here. As Sol scans the vegetation, listen to this French horn music. The first two notes are those of John Williams' Force theme, which also used the French horn. But the composer takes the melody back down into a minor key to cast the Jedi mission with a sense of doom. And yes, I did just reference Kendrick's Not Like Us, which Jessica just did an amazing music video breakdown of. Please go watch that video. She did such a good job. Okay, so Sol, Indara, Kelnacca, and Torbin are collecting samples of plant, soil, and water, seeking signs of a vergence. And as was the case in episode 3, the Jedi all exhale with visible breath, showing their lack of acclimation to the cold weather, which continues throughout this episode, though you do not see the breath of the witches because they must be acclimated or maybe just cold-blooded, a little less than alive, you know? They can turn into black smoke on a moment's notice. People turning into black smoke? I thought we were done with the lost parallels after episode 5. So in this wide shot, you see the fog rapidly receding down into the valley, but I think that fog lingers over their campsite as well, and that could be how the Jedi were able to stay blind to the other parts of Brendok, like the Northlands. There could just be natural forces on this planet stirred by the witches to keep the Jedi in the smokescreen. Kelnacca has prepared some dinner, roasted Nuna legs. So Nunas, aka swamp turkeys, can be found on Naboo. We also saw some on Jabba's balcony in Phantom Menace. Nuna was actually on the menus in Mandalorian chapter 16 and chapter 21. I know that because I translated all the goddamn Orabesh on those menus. And if you go to Disney's Galaxy's Edge, you can get Nuna turkey jerky and pay way too much for it, as you have to at everything at Disney nowadays. Kelnacca roasts the Nuna on a spit, similar to another Wookiee, Chewbacca, roasting a porg on a spit in The Last Jedi. Indara says,
100 years ago, this planet was cataloged as lifeless because of a hyperspace disaster.
Ah, this is a reference to the great hyperspace disaster of 232 BBY, which really kicks off the High Republic novel Light of the Jedi. A freighter named the Legacy Run was carrying 9,000 passengers, as well as some explosive materials, through hyperspace when a Nihil warship appeared in their path, causing a collision and a massive debris field hurtling toward various systems, including Hetzal Prime. Indara is saying that while the hyperspace disaster was happening, when people like Kevin Tarr were quickly scanning star maps to see which planets would be in the danger zone, they saw Brendok and then just just assumed, hey, no need to worry about that one. There's no life on that. Now, I was unclear based on Indara's wording whether she might have been saying the hyperspace disaster killed a civilization and ecosystem that used to be on the planet, or if Brendok just luckily missed the collisions. And in a Zoom roundtable that Leslye Headland did with press this morning, she confirmed to us that the hyperspace disaster did not touch Brendok, but it was this event that put the planet on the map for the Republic. Because if the Jedi didn't know about this planet's existence with the Virgins before, and if the witches were brought here from somewhere else relatively recently, as Aniseya told Coral in episode 3, it is very possible that those force-hinged ruins in a big pit beaming up a wellspring of force energy must have been built by someone else who knew what they were doing with the Force, leaving the Sith as very likely suspects. Torbin is very homesick this episode.
And I want to go home to Coruscant. Will they let us come home at least?
Yes, at first it comes off as kind of annoying, but we actually do learn a bit later why he might hate it here so much and why he would be so attached to Coruscant. But I have to appreciate how much Lee Jung-jae is going to town on his food. He goes back for seconds at one point and he digs a dull spoon into a leg of meat rather than just pick up the leg by the bone and eat it like he's at a Ren fair. But in the last shot, he manages to get a good little chunk on the spoon. Ah, dull spoon, an elegant silverware for a more civilized age. There's this music. The first two notes sound like Kylo Ren's theme, but then again, the melody goes in a different direction. However, the Kylo Ren theme does come back noticeably in a different moment with Kelnacca later on. So in the past two episodes, when we heard the Kylo Ren theme in relation to Chimere and to his helmet, it made some sense to me that this could have been a clue pointing to Chimere being connected to the Knights of Ren, maybe even the first Ren. But in this episode, I just kind of struggled to see how that music would relate to the witches and their effect on the Jedi, unless the Kylo Ren music is just this show's way of saying all of these characters are flawed and maybe even Chimere is masterminding this whole conflict. Indara says that she teaches Torbin to find the answers himself, whereas Sol would just want to give the answers that ease the mind, and that's why he doesn't have a Padawan, as she gives a condescending pat on the shoulder. We will see how Sol will have to apply this comforting truth approach when it comes to Osha, and how all these Jedi choosing to uphold a convenient lie will be their undoing. Sol takes his speeder bike to the area with a bunta tree, and if you look closely, there are two of those hummingbird-like insects flying close to each other, but as Sol approaches, they fly apart from each other, which I think foreshadows the divide Sol will create in Osha in May. I think it's safe to assume that this bunta tree might be a secondary spring of the Virgins, as trees have historically been deeply spiritual sources of force energy like the Uneti tree in the Jedi Temple, and it would explain why the bunta tree has yellow flora unlike its surroundings and is buzzing with these creatures. But what does it say that the outgrowth on the bark of this tree created the poison that killed Torbin? Is the outgrowth a fruit of the tree? Fruit doesn't normally grow on the bark or the trunk of a tree. Or is it a separate organism, a parasitic fungus that's leeching off of the tree? If it's a fungus, it could represent the dark side of the force leeching upon the Virgins, siphoning its energy away. But if it's a fruit, it would mean that the entire Virgins, down to its source, has already been corrupted from the roots. The conversation from the opening of episode 3 plays again as we see it from Sol's point of view, spying from behind these pieces of stone. Reframing events from different witness perspectives is what Leslye Headland meant when she said that an episode of the season would be inspired by Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon. But to be real film nerdy about this, to say something is truly Rashomon-esque wouldn't just be showing objective events from new angles, like, characters using time travel to loop back on history and look at themselves, as in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban or Back to the Future Part 2. Rashomon would mean saying the version of events the viewer saw and didn't doubt initially was actually being presented in a subjective light from an unreliable narrator, and then seeing those events another time where completely different things happen according to a second equally unreliable narrator, and most importantly, never outright telling the viewer which version of events was the objective truth. But there are a few examples of that subjectivity in this episode that I will point out, and they're really, really cool. So this means that Sol was hiding in the background of that opening conversation in episode 3. It reminds me of Alfonso Cuarón's amazing attention to detail in Prisoner of Azkaban, when before we even knew that Harry and Hermione would be using the time turner to loop back on their day, in that wide shot of Hermione pointing her wand at Malfoy's neck, you can already see the future Hermione's hand on the wall in the door frame of that structure behind them. So I did actually go back to episode 3 to check the background to see if we could see Sol snooping around. But when I was able to map this scene, Sol is actually behind where the camera would be placed in episode 3. So we actually never see that part of the background or that particular shape of the donut stone thing that he is hiding behind. But as Sol watches the girls rhyme, the way Mother Coral appears from behind the tree, from Sol's perspective, is now super creepy. It looks like she just comes from out of nowhere. From a distance, it looks pretty abusive.
Consequence for breaking the rules.
Ah, so this actually is Rashomon, because in the episode 3 version of this exchange, Coral is far less aggressive.
There will be consequences for breaking the rules.
There's definitely a difference there. In the old version, it was a stern but caring and nurturing mother figure, like McGonagall. But now, from Sol's perspective, it looks more like,
Barrick, you put your name in a goblet of fire.
So Sol follows them to their compound. Torbin does later point out,
This must be an old mining site.
we also know that this compound has a generator because later that's the generator that explodes to cause the witches to die. So what was this compound built to mine? Was it mining cortosis, a substance that would be a Sith opposite to kyber crystals that are harvested on Ilum, which is also known to contain a vergence in the Force? This compound was definitely built pre-hyperspace disaster because our handy audio description, while less hot and bothered this week, does describe Sol's climb with these words.
Using its stone bricks as foot and handholds, he begins an arduous ascent up the face of the ancient edifice.
She says ancient edifice, and ancient would be more than 100 years. But it takes Sol so long to climb that he misses Mother Aniseya's wholesome spiel about the thread and only catches the end of her lecture where she hits the girls with an abusive force push.
Your enemies will not warn you before they attack!
And we learn that it was Sol that caused the creak on the catwalk by the generator that the witches heard back in episode 3, which in retrospect was totally like Harry and Hermione seeing the pebble break the stuff in Hagrid's hut. Sol reports,
I think they're witches.
Night Sisters.
Torbin is like, ooh, something from Clone Wars? So the Night Sisters are a cult of witches led by Mother Talzin on Dathomir, which we learned from the Ahsoka series was actually part of a much older tradition of witches that came from Peridia in another galaxy. Leslye Headland has confirmed that Mother Aniseya's cult are not Night Sisters, and they are not the Path of the Open Hand from the High Republic novels, but that doesn't mean that this group couldn't be a different splinter group from the same origin of Peridia as the Dathomirian branch that's called Night Sisters. Indara looks with concern at the approaching lunar eclipse, and we see the red and the blue moons much closer than we did before, with the blue moon's rings much clearer. So for Indara, that is a proof that this group might actually be involved in some culty shit tonight, because various cultures have always closely followed the heavenly bodies. We saw this with the Eye of Aldani on Andor, and how those locals on that planet would make regular pilgrimages just to witness it. Indara tells Kelnacca to slice the controls, which was a term for hacking in Knights of the Old Republic. She wants to go in alone, but Sol wants to go in as a team. Indara, though, would be proven right. Having more minds for Aniseya to invade was a huge vulnerability for them. Now, whereas before the compound courtyard was clear, now it is foggy again, and the Jedi breath is once again visible. And now we see this from Torbin's perspective as Aniseya invades his mind.
Torbin, Jedi Padawan, son of paupers from the planet Bonadon.
Bonadon was a mining planet from the Hydean Way. That is why Torbin recognized this structure as a mining facility. And Bonadon first appeared in Han Solo's Revenge by Brian Daley in 1979, the first book actually to introduce the Tanan species. So someone who worked on the show was a big fan of that book. It's interesting for Aniseya, though, to bring up his pauper planets on Bonadon, which reframes Torbin's homesickness for Coruscant, because it makes sense that Torbin would not like a planet with a mind that reminds him of his poor upbringing.
You've traveled so far only to become trapped on this planet.
But she tells him that she can help him escape this planet, and there is this creepy effect where a second version of Aniseya suddenly appears in the foreground, and she's so close to the camera that you don't even realize that that's an additional Aniseya, all while the original projection is still right by his side.
I can help you. I can help you. I can help you. I can help you.
And with the audio mix, we the viewers hear, it's kind of like Aniseya is giving Torbin a practical surround sound and using her body to create a breadcrumb trail that would be leading further and further away. But you know what they say about witches and trails of breadcrumbs, right? Eat it! It's a free lunch and it's delicious, and who cares if you end up in an oven? This world's going to hell anyway. And as Aniseya circles him, her breath is also visible now, so her projection is adopting the same temperature as his body, which is a cool way of showing that she is inside of his mind. So back on the Jedi ship, we learned that Indara thought that Sol's suggestion to test the girls was just a ploy to get Aniseya to release Torbin, which really exonerates Indara from our assumptions in episode 3. She says that the girls are too old, and earlier she pointed out that there were only 2 kids to 50 adults, meaning there would be lots of caretakers, and it's really not the worst place for kids to grow up that these Jedi have probably come across. It's really Sol who is pushing it.
I feel she's meant to be my Padawan.
Indara places her hand on his shoulder just as she did before, but whereas then it was a condescending gesture, now it's out of concern. Indara says,
Ceremonial markings are customary in many cultures in the galaxy.
Indeed, Indara has a marking on the side of her face, though that side is turned away from us in this shot. Indara and Sol talk about how Osha didn't have a marking, wondering if that could make her an outcast to the cult, but their speculation is all off. While Osha didn't want to be marked and join the Ascension, and indeed Sol overheard her saying that she didn't want to go through the Ascension back by the Bunta tree, the only reason Osha didn't get marked was because the ceremony was interrupted by the Jedi breaking into the compound. It was the Jedi's choices that affected this outcome, not destiny, and not even Osha's actual choices. Today's video is sponsored by Blue Chew! If you're looking for hot fun in the summertime but need some help getting your mercury to rise, Blue Chew can help. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night. That way you can plan ahead or be ready for whenever an opportunity arises.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys!
It's super easy to do. Just sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. It's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. If you're skeptical or don't think you need it, try it for a month and see. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at bluechew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code New Rockstars at checkout. Just pay $5 in shipping. That's bluechew.com, promo code New Rockstars to receive your first month free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring this video. While Torbin now takes May into the ship in this episode, he stands over her and asks to take her blood sample first. But remember when he was with Osha in episode 3, the second girl to be tested, he knelt down to reassure her. And when she was distracted by his lightsaber, he caught her off guard to take her blood sample without asking. They test May with the same kind of test though. The first screen shows a Wampa, which we saw on Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back, and she says it's a ship. Next is a Lothcat, which she says is a castle, then a Gonk droid, which she says is a planet, and then she says a necklace before there's really anything on screen. Now May says the Ascension would result in her and Osha becoming leaders of the Coven, and then tries to quote her mother.
Mama said, everyone must walk through fear. Everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny.
Whoa, no. May is misremembering the exact words that Mother Aniseya used in episode 3.
Ascension is about walking through fear. It is about sacrificing a part of yourself. The power of many instead of the power of one.
So we're seeing a form of Rashomon in the form of just a child's memory. And she doesn't realize that to these Jedi, this sounds like some major Jonestown shit. But with Osha's test, we see where the scene in episode 3 ended, but now we let the scene run a little bit longer to see Indara stepping in.
Then you must have the courage to tell the truth.
We should continue the test. We should continue the test.
A planet.
Correct.
As Indara contacts the Jedi Council for further instruction, there's a cool camera effect where it looks like Sol has stepped up behind Indara to her side, but it's actually his reflection on our side of the screen as he now appears on the left side of frame. Visually, it reminds us how Sol, at the same control panel in episode 6, thought about seeking help from the Jedi Council, but ultimately switched off the transponder at the end of episode 6. This reflection shot shows how Sol seems like he's in an alignment with Indara, but is actually on his own path. Later, Indara says the Council said no to taking in the girls, and Torbin says,
But there's something dangerous about those women.
Okay, Torbin, there's something dangerous about the way you said women. Indara says Sol does not get to alter this girl's destiny just because of what he thinks is best for her. As a character, I think he certainly parallels Chimere, who just wants an acolyte at all costs, not because of what's best for the prospective pupil, but for what he wants. Torbin's blood test comes back for the girls, and both girls have extremely high M counts, they say. M count referring to midichlorians, of course. The term M count was first used in The Mandalorian. Torbin also says that their symbionts are exactly the same. Symbiont, I assume, referring to whatever their genetic codex is, and that should be impossible, even for twins, without some kind of manipulation. And Sol speculates,
The twins were artificially created?
Maybe by tapping into a power dense enough to split one consciousness into two bodies?
so did the Coven split one consciousness into two because two would be stronger, as in the Sith rule of two, or a Force dyad? Or maybe did the Sith incept twins in Mother Coral to try to break the Sith rule of two with future successors who would be sharing one consciousness? Like if Chimere wanted to break away from the Sith and form the Knights of Ren, having his successors be already two beings in one could just be a way that he breaks that math, right? It's kind of hard to think about this because there are two spheres of lore mystery remaining on this series. Sphere 1 refers to the witches on Brendok, the Virgins, the girl's creation, the Ascension. Sphere 2 refers to Chimere and the Sith, the Cortosis on that mystery planet, which might be Vilderman, and what his big plan is. I was hoping that these might have just been one sphere, but after this episode, it seems like they might be two different things with different sources of answers. This episode answered like 60% of the first sphere, while not yet explaining what the Ascension actually is. I have a theory for how these spheres could connect and how it could all be answered in the finale. It's just, you know, we've been down this road on Disney Plus before. There's a very good chance that the series doesn't answer all of our questions. While this episode makes Aniseya kinder in retrospect, it makes Coral look like way more of a jerk.
I don't want to go. You want to stop Osha from leaving? Then stop her.
And then she surprises the little girl with her staff and says,
"Good girl. Get mad."
Get mad? Doesn't it sound like, you know, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering? The other witches argue with Aniseya.
You would sacrifice our future for the wish of a child. Right now, I choose Mother.
I choose Mother. Mother! This ties directly into one of the two theories that I have for how this could all connect. I'll get to that at the end of this video. But we learned that the oil lantern fire was an accident by May that she tried to put out, and that apparently all the electrical controls in this compound are contained in a closed system that all go back to the generator, and that generator is just ready to blow the moment any fuse would go out. Sol, now envisioning the crisis that's happening inside the fortress, is like, you know what, I'm just gonna go in just to help. It all happens really fast, and things escalate really quickly, and everyone just assumes the worst from each other. Sol asks Aniseya how the twins were created, and she does not answer, but she does say this.
Someday those noble intentions you all have will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy.
Of course, a truth that we will see unfold by Order 66. But is Aniseya just making a hypothetical threat? Or does she have some actual foresight into the events to come? This is why I think that she might be in league with the Sith, like the Sith told her what their eventual plan is. May runs out to ask for help, and Torbin draws his lightsaber. Coral moves into attack mode, but Sol cannot see May's forehead marking from this angle and assumes it's Osha, and Aniseya screams, "No!" And then this happens? What? Sol assumes Aniseya is attacking Osha, but really Aniseya was moving, I think, to envelop her and May in a protective embrace and then teleport both of them to safety. And to do so, Aniseya would have to transfigure both her and May into black smoke. Sorry to keep making Harry Potter references in this video, but it reminds me of the film versions of how Death Eaters would apparate into black smoke and that they could fly and grab others while they did it. My thinking is that Aniseya could only do this because May went through with the Ascension step, got the marking on her forehead. I don't know if she would be able to transfigure Osha the same way. As soon as you enter into this coven, you're all kind of linked into this transfiguration process. The power of one, the power of two, power of many. They basically transformed their bodies into the dark side of the Force. I don't know exactly if that's what happened there, but it looks pretty damn cool. Now, in the Zoom roundtable, Leslye Headland said that Aniseya was transforming her body into the Force, apparently taking a different appearance as this would be a threat approach and doing so to save herself and to save May. Leslye likened this with Jekki's line in episode 4, how it's a beautiful thing to witness someone becoming one with the Force. Sol, very fairly not understanding what's going on here, stabs Aniseya, and as the blue glow of his lightsaber reflects off of both of their faces, we are reminded of this moment with Chimere in episode 5.
I've accepted my darkness. What have you done with yours?
How does Chimere know that, though? Obviously, there's a lot of questions as to how Chimere is connected to all of this. The archers let their glowing tipped arrows fly, and we see why Torbin was so itchy for a fight. He twirls his lightsaber with some Obi-Wan moves, and at one point socks an arrow like he's at a batting cage. Sol only uses evasive maneuvers against Coral, even letting her elbow him in the face, taking his beating as if he feels he deserves it. But when the explosions rock the compound, he has to ignite his saber to cut Coral's staff because now he's in rescue mode. But Coral turns herself into black smoke, and all the archers have disappeared as well. So Torbin thinks what Aniseya did to him is happening again.
You should not have brought him here.
No. My mind is fortified.
Not you.
Not you! And we see a horrifying silhouette of Kelnacca, who ignites his green saber with the blue and the red moons framed perfectly behind him, as if he is part of this as a lunar destiny to control our actions. We cut to the witch elder and the other witches swaying as they collectively control Kelnacca, and I like that detail that it takes that many of them to operate one Wookiee. But we do not see Coral among them. In fact, we never see Coral again this episode. I love how each of Kelnacca's saber blows knocks Sol and Torbin off balance, and his force pushes are even more powerful than normal. Kelnacca force pulls Torbin into his paw and slams his head into a wall, giving him those facial scars that Torbin will have throughout the rest of his life, while Torbin musters just enough energy to bring his yellow saber around to block Kelnacca's killing blow. In the Zoom roundtable, Alex from Star Wars Explained asked Leslye an excellent question about the Wookiee concept of Mad Claw, how Wookiees are supposed to value their claws in particular and use them only for peaceful reasons. To use your claw the way Kelnacca is using it on Torbin here would be labeled Mad Claw and bring on great shame upon the Wookiee. Leslye confirmed that that was the intention here, and that although Kelnacca is under mind control, the shame he would still feel contributes to why he goes into exile. And obviously the events of this episode established why he was so obsessed with Aniseya's spiral symbol and painted it all over the walls of his home. Sol is able to break him free, and then we get the Kylo Ren music sting in there, and then an awesome combination here. Kelnacca kicks a hole in a door, and then Sol leaps over Kelnacca's swing, deactivating his saber so that it wouldn't clip Kelnacca's, and then uses the hilt alone to get in a few jabs and to disarm Kelnacca. This, in a way, is the inverse of the Trakata method that Chimera uses. Instead of suddenly switching on your saber in ways to surprise your opponent, you turn off your saber to surprise them and best them as they would still be blinded by the bright glow of your saber that was there a moment earlier, and disarm them as they're still adjusting to the absence of light. Indara forces the witches out of his mind, and it's pretty impressive that Indara could do this, like that any Jedi Master could do this. Was Indara's defensiveness of the matriarchal religious orders that use facial markings and her own facial marking an indication that she could come from a cult that has mind-invading skills beyond that of a normal Jedi? Her hands are covered in black gloves. I don't know, maybe they're covered in markings from the Path of the Open Hand or something. We return to the critical moment on the broken walkway. Now we see what we did not before. Both sides of the walkway tilt, and Sol uses both his hands to try to catch both girls, but he has to choose which one to save. It's kind of like the horrifying climax of the 1993 movie The Good Son with Elijah Wood and Macaulay Culkin. Oh god. And we see why Sol has become a master at catching people when they start to fall. Now, we actually went back and watched episode 3 in this moment, and they actually did change the staging here slightly. In episode 3, when May falls, we see Sol jumping toward her with his arm reaching for her, but here he painfully turns away from her, and his arms are always pointing toward Osha. So I wonder if episode 3 is what Osha assumed Sol did, giving him the benefit of the doubt, historically, since she was not really watching him in that moment, according to this episode. But again, we do not see where May goes when she falls, or how she survived that fall. But remember, we don't know where Coral ended up. Maybe she was able to catch her. Indara says,
"We will tell the council the truth.
May burned down the witch's fortress, and everyone was lost."
But when Sol says that he must face the council, there is some odd blocking with Carrion Moss here. Check it out.
Why would you do that to her? After everything this little girl has lost tonight, you take away her dream as well?
The second part of that line, after everything this little girl has lost tonight, you take away her dream as well. That's a pretty heavy line. You'd think they would stay on Carrie-Anne Moss's face for that, or at least for part of the line. So I think they might have added this part of the line in ADR, maybe because the emotional beat wasn't hitting before. I wish I didn't always notice these things, folks. Now, over the credits, we hear the song called Power of Two. It's a down-tempo pop song with vocal lyrics. That's not something we've ever heard in Star Wars before. If I'm gonna hear vocals in Star Wars, I want it to be either Kora Bata Sanskrit or hum 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 from the Book of Boba Fett. Whatever, the song itself and the lyrics are pretty great because they thematically resonate with the power of two. I just find this episode to be a weird moment to feature it. Like, hey, I grew up as a 90s kid. I loved walking out of Disney movies with soulful pop ballad versions of the theme songs over the credits. I just think this heartbreaking moment revealing the Jedi as flawed f***ups would have been better served with a poignant silence over the credits. But I'm not gonna go into the whole what is and what is not Star Wars on you, and instead leave you with the two theories as to how next week's finale might resolve all of this. The first one is kind of crazy. Theory 1, Osha was right to fear the Ascension. It truly was a Jonestown situation where all of these witches plan to fuse their bodies into one higher consciousness or being, using the conduit of two twins artificially created and split into two, the better to channel the Virgin's energy like a Sith tuning fork shape. And this cult actually worships a mother deity, as in the mother of Mortis, Abeloth. Ahsoka season 2 rumors have swirled that they are casting Abeloth, and that they planned to merge their souls and to ascend to become one with or to reawaken the the Mother Abeloth, and maybe Chymir's true allegiance is to the son of Mortis, and that this is all about the gods of Mortis. That's a reach, I will admit. So, theory 2. All of the witches are actually dying due to some illness or curse or prophecy that makes them believe that their time is limited. Their goal is to transfer all of their life forces into these 2 girls. That is the ascension, the power of 1, the power of 2, the power of many. These girls are literally the future of this cult. And Aniseya and Coral were aided by a dark side user, Chimir, who brought them to this old Sith stronghold that's built over a vergence that emits dark side energy that beams and maybe even triangulates off of these nearby moons in a network of secret dark side vergence channels leading to Baldemnik, and that the byproduct of this vergence is Cortosis, the anti-Kyber crystal. And Chimir brought these dying witches here to feed the vergence at the source and to produce girls that he could use to overthrow his Sith master to begin his own order, the Knights of Ren. To be honest, I'm not that crazy about either of those theories, but comment down below with how you think this is all going to end. Follow me at EA Voss, subscribe to all 3 channels of the new Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.